China on Friday congratulated Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, saying China will respect the choice of the American people. That's 1 week after the U.S. media projected the former United States Vice President as the winner of the presidential election. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. China became one of the last major countries to congratulate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for winning the November 3rd election, a victory contested by President Trump, who continues to allege voter fraud, although no irregularities, officials tell us, have been found. Meanwhile, the coronavirus pandemic continues to surge across the country. More than 150,000 new cases reported in a single day. Well, there's lots to talk about. But first, let's get to our White House correspondent, Nathan King. And Nathan, President Trump making his first appearance since the November 3rd election, talking about a coronavirus vaccine. What can you tell us?
Well, it was a very strange press conference. Look, I don't want to read too much into body language, but you could tell the president was a little deflated. His hair color and his hair, which he always obsesses about, was very different. And he really wasn't on his game at all. In fact, he even made an admission almost that in the rollout of any potential vaccine, he may not be the man in charge. Corrected himself, but you could see he was contemplating the fact that he was not going to be president on January 20th. I mean, this sort of goes against exactly what the White House has been saying for the last week or so. We had his press secretary, Katie McEnany, saying he's going to turn up for the inauguration on January the 20th because it's going to be his inauguration. We had Mike Pompeo the other day saying we are preparing for a seamless transition to a second Trump term. We had Peter Navarro, the controversial trade guy here at the White House, saying, yeah, we're preparing for a second Trump term. But, you know, we've seen the results, and essentially it's 306 electoral college votes for Joe Biden, exactly what Trump got in 2016, which he called the hugest win ever. So they've really got a choice to make, and we're seeing cracks in the wall in terms of the GOP, the Republican Party, more and more suggesting that they should move to some sort of transition. First of all, suggesting that Joe Biden receives the intelligence briefing, which of course is probably one of the most important things an incoming president has. But I can tell you, talking to some transition officials today, there's a whole area of desks at the Commerce Department near here that are ready for them. They just haven't been signed off. In fact, there's a few contractors who are just literally earning overtime as we speak. So it's a very, very strange period. Remember, a week ago nearly, this election was essentially called for Joe Biden. We've never had this in American history where the sitting president has sort of failed to concede. And it's putting a lot of countries in a bind, but also this country too. And the problem is with this vacuum, although it's been pretty peaceful so far, we could see tensions rise.
Nathan, one other big development, and that's coming from China. China, of course, a very important country as far as trade and economic relations with the United States is concerned. China now congratulating the projected winner, Joe Biden, as well as the projected vice presidential winner, Kamala Harris. What do you know about what came out of Beijing?
Well, I mean, traditionally, China has always waited for the concession call from the losing candidate and then issue congratulations. And let's face it, for every country on earth, this has never really been a problem before. This is a Washington problem, not a Beijing problem. But the longer this went on, of course, it's more difficult. What I thought from the Chinese statement, we'll play it in a second, is actually a nuance, because they did congratulate the will of the American people in electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but they also acknowledged that there's another process, the Electoral College, essentially, and the ratification of votes in Congress. In fact, it was probably the most diplomatic and astute analysis of the American political system. It is not a direct vote by the people, as we may find out if the US president currently continues to fight. Let's take a listen for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement.
We've been paying close attention to the reactions to the US presidential election from within the United States and in the international community. We respect the American people's choice. We extend our congratulations to Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris. In the meantime, we understand that the results of this presidential election will be made in line with U.S. law and relevant procedures.
US law and relevant procedures. Look, let's face it. I mean, the legal challenges for fraud and et cetera, all these allegations are going to zero. The fraud hotline set up by the Trump administration, campaign rather, has been shut down because people are prank calling, not calling in about fraud. I think they are 1 for 18 when it comes to lawsuits. Nothing that can change this election. Literally, the sun is setting on this activity. The question is when they throw in the towel, and how and whether this very important transition happens, because this is really unique in American history. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King talking to us from the White House. Well, let's continue with the discussion with our panel. Joining us from Las Vegas, Nevada, Chris Prudhome is a Republican strategist and president of Sunvision Strategies. Christopher Hahn joins us from Long Island, New York. He's host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. In Arnold, Maryland, Dr. Ron Elfenbein is medical director and CEO at Chesapeake Urgent Care. And with us here in Washington, D.C., Brian O'Donovan is DC Correspondent with the Irish network RTE News. Welcome to all of you. Chris Prudhome, let me start with you. President Trump continues to allege voter fraud despite the facts really going against him. And we've heard from cybersecurity experts who've told us that this was one of the most secure elections in U.S. history. We've heard from officials in the 50 states who've told us that this was an election where they didn't see any kind of fraud or any major irregularities. But the president seems to want to continue fighting what seems to be a losing battle. Why does he continue to do this?
Well, look, it's important that we have a free and fair election. Look, the president has continuously talked about this. And of course, people in the media and other entities are going to say certain things. Of course, they're going to come out with their top liners for people that what they think is right. Look, he has every right, as any other individual does, any other candidate does, to contest an election. And that's what this is about. Look, but there are irregularities. Okay, I'm on here in Nevada. I'm on the ground here myself. I can tell you, I've seen them myself. You have facts of dead people who ballots have been cast. We have affidavits in 5 different states, 429 of them, as a matter of fact, over 11,000 incidences of irregularities. The reality is this: I don't care what political party you are, what your thoughts or beliefs are. The reality is there are issues with our voting process. Period. Yeah. Point blank. And that's the reality. That's what this is about. So people can say what they want or call them what they want. The reality is that you all have to acknowledge and admit that we have an issue in our system with the electoral process, and that's what this comes down to. That's really what this issue is.
But Chris Prudhome, I mean, the point of the matter is that, look, nobody's saying that there were no irregularities. I don't think there's any election in the world that is 100% absolutely perfect.
Well, people are saying that.
Yeah, they are. But the point of the matter is, even with these cases that the president is bringing, nothing's going to be reversed here, is it?
Look. So I can't speak to that. I can't speak to that. And look, I cannot speak to that at all. People are certainly discussing that. They're talking about that. And look, but I can't speak to in regards to what his decisions are. I know the president will continue to fight, continue to do what he wants to do, and that's simply it. That's frankly it.
Okay, fair enough. Chris Hahn, what do you make of what the president is doing right now? I mean, there's been some speculation here in Washington that what the president is really doing is trying to cast as much doubt as he can on the conduct of the election, on its integrity, on the legitimacy of Vice President Biden's win.
Yeah, I think it's pathetic. I think it's un-American. The president has multiple lawsuits across the country. All of them, for the most part, have been thrown out. He had one win where the distance between where people could stand was reduced by 6 feet. Good on you, Mr. President. You're really challenging our election systems. There's no proof whatsoever of widespread fraud or abuse in this election. The margins of victory are astounding. In fact, Joe Biden has a bigger margin of victory in the popular vote than Ronald Reagan did in 1980. And his electoral college win is the exact same number that President Trump had 4 years ago, which Donald Trump referred to as a landslide, even though he failed to win the popular vote nationally. So the president is a pathetic human being. Mm-hmm. He is absolutely setting himself up for another run, or at least he's going to pretend to run, because why would he stop raising money and grifting his supporters as he's been doing over the last 4 years? He'll continue that grift, and he'll use that money to do whatever it is he's going to do. But the President of the United States will not be President of the United States on January 20th. He knows that. He kind of slipped a little bit today during his press conference when he was talking about maybe the next administration. So I expect this to wrap up very soon. I think Republicans in this country who continue to support the charade are doing a disservice to this country, because you're allowing 70 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump to think that there was some sort of fraud and that their vote didn't count. That could backfire on them should Donald Trump decide to leave politics after this completely. Those people might be discouraged from voting in the future, and that's not good for the Republican Party. And quite frankly, it's not good for America when people think that their vote doesn't count. So I hope the president comes to his senses. More importantly, I come to their senses sooner rather than later so we can move on.
Okay, well, let's take a look at how this election is being seen from outside the United States. We have with us Brian O'Donovan. Brian, great to see you again. Were there many sighs of relief in most of the European capitals when we learned that Joe Biden will be the next president, do you think?
There was quite a bit of celebrating in Ireland, I can tell you, but that's because he has Irish roots. His family are originally from Ballina, County Mayo, which is a small town on the west coast of Ireland. There were celebrations on the streets, certainly there. In general, in Europe, yes, and I thought it was very interesting to see the progression of leaders calling him and congratulating him over the last few days. Again, coming back to my own country, Ireland, I know they were quite pleased that they were put up quite high on Joe Biden's list of calls on one of the days this week. He spoke to Boris Johnson of the UK, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, and our own Taoiseach Micheál Martin. Ireland, of course, in that realm of countries would be much, much smaller, but I think once again it's this nod to Joe Biden's Irish-American roots. Ireland would be very hopeful that Joe Biden will be a friend in the White House. They would see him as someone who is very pro-Ireland. They would see him as someone who's very pro the peace process. And as we know, there's been fresh questions about the peace process in Ireland, fresh questions about a possible reimposition of a hard border on the island of Ireland as the Brexit situation rumbles on. But I think certainly from an Irish perspective, relief, and certainly lots of congratulations and lots of celebrations for a Joe Biden win.
I also saw an interesting tidbit, Brian, about, I think it was your network, RTE, that played a clip of Biden actually singing an Irish song on the night that he was, we saw him to be the projected winner.
And of course, Joe Biden's big love as well as Irish poetry. And he is always quoting the very famous Irish poet Seamus Heaney. And he uses this in his speeches all the time. He put out a lovely campaign video during the campaign of him doing one of the poems, cut to some of the music and some of the imagery. I should preface this. It's not to say Donald Trump is completely unpopular in Ireland. Donald Trump has a golf course in the west of Ireland in Doonbeg, County Clare. There were some celebrations on the streets there as well when it looked like he was doing better. There was lots of the locals in Doonbeg hopeful that he would do well. There was a sense out there that he has been good for that area. He's provided a lot of employment to that area, but of course it wasn't to be, so there's been disappointment there. And one of my favourite headlines from the week actually was from the local newspaper down in County Clare, which went, "Local hotelier loses election."
Ron Elfenbein, lest we forget, we're of course still in the middle of a pandemic. President Trump spoke about that late on Friday afternoon. We had almost 1,900 people who died because of COVID-19. That was yesterday on Thursday. It was the highest number of deaths we've seen since May. What is the situation in the country right now?
Well, the situation is that the COVID-19 is obviously getting worse in terms of overall infectivity rates and people catching it and actually people dying from it. Now, that being said, the mortality rate has gone way down. The problem with these statistics are it's very difficult to compare. You want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, and oftentimes you're not. It's very difficult within countries, between countries. Even when you listen to the news, people hear, oh, the fatality rate. Well, what exactly does that mean? There's multiple different ways to define fatality rate, believe it or not. So it's very difficult to kind of, for the average Joe to understand exactly what they're being told and to trust what they're being told from the media, from the institutions. It's just because there's so many ways to define things, it's very difficult to actually do that. So, overall, the numbers are getting worse. But again, it's not unexpected. The weather's getting colder in the United States. People are going outside more. Going inside more, not going outside as much. They're congregating more inside. This has now been going on for many, many months. People are fatigued and tired of it. So, there might not be as adherent to the policies and procedures of wearing masks and washing your hands and things like that. And if you look at the natural history of pandemics, there's always a second wave, and I believe we're kind of in that second wave now, and the second wave is always worse than the first wave. Furthermore, if you look at the natural history of sort of coronaviruses, they tend to be, all the other coronaviruses tend to be worse in the wintertime or the cold weather, and we're going into that right now. So none of this is really that unexpected, the second spike. It is concerning and it is worrisome, but it is not unexpected.
Ron, as you say, the numbers are going up because of change in weather, of course. But what about the mitigation measures that are being taken? Are people turning away from the advice that they've been given, or are they embracing it?
No, I think people, I don't want to put this at the feet of the people that the numbers are getting worse. I don't want to blame people, and I'm a very optimistic person. So I think at the end of the day, we got a lot to look forward to. We have a vaccine that supposedly is 90% efficacious, and that's the annual flu shot's only 40 to 60% efficacious. So if you look at the fact that this is coming out, this is fantastic. I mean, it's not only a home run; it's a grand slam, to use a baseball parlance. But those are all very preliminary numbers, and they're numbers that Pfizer put out. They haven't been peer reviewed. They haven't really been looked at. And the Pfizer has not applied for emergency use authorization. So I would caution people that, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel and things look like they're improving. But at the same time, we have to take that with a grain of salt.
Right.
God, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I was just saying, so I don't want to put this at the feet of people that the numbers are getting worse, to say, oh, people are not wearing their masks as much as they should and such. Yes, that is true. But I think more so it's the fact that it's getting colder outside. Halloween just occurred, and those numbers take time to kind of get tabulated. So the fact that Halloween occurred 2 weeks ago, we're kind of seeing spikes now because, in my opinion, a lot of that was because of Halloween parties and Halloween people going out and people getting close to each other and not necessarily wearing masks. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and it's multifactorial.
Okay, Chris Prudhome, let's get back to the presidential election, to politics. The big focus, of course, is on the race for the White House, the battle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But if we look at the legislative races in the country, what are referred to as the down-ballot races, the Republicans did relatively well. They won seats in the House of Representatives, and they will possibly hold on to the United States Senate, which is very important for them. They also did well across the country in state legislature elections. So how do you explain this sort of divided support for the Republicans here? Did we have a lot of people who said, we're going to vote for Joe Biden at the top of the ticket and then vote Republican the rest of the way through?
So when you look at places, for example, like Georgia, that's why there's a lot of ambiguity there. When you look at all the individuals who voted for only president, right? All right. President Trump has 881, I think roughly around 881 votes, to Biden's 95,000 votes. When you look at the individuals who voted for president in other races, President Trump has, I think, a little over 2.4, Biden has 2.3. All that being said, that's why there's such ambiguity there and a lot of eyebrows raised over election fraud, election issues. It is examples like that that really raise an eyebrow. Look, I think people obviously, I think it's a great thing. We were able to successfully pick up several seats in California, out of all places, California. So I think we've done a phenomenal job. Whatever obviously took place, as obviously we're going through our process and fighting and figuring things out. But those irregularities are things why I believe we have issues today. Many of us don't believe, not from emotional reasons, from mathematical reasons, from a data standpoint. You have places like Michigan. It's just absolutely crazy. The night before, election night, we were in a substantial lead, and the next morning, America wakes up. We were up all night, but America wakes up, and you see it kind of turned over on itself. So, look, we're going to go through the process entirely from A to Z. We're going to find out any flaws, any irregularities. We have a great data team all across America. I know I'm here in Nevada now, at the moment, and I can tell you now, me and everybody else is not away from home for nothing. We're here in this state because I believe in what's going on, and we believe it in obviously cleaning and fixing our process, because it's too antiquated of a system to have these type of issues take place.
Okay, Chris Hahn, of course, there may be these question marks still being posed over the election, but Joe Biden and his team, they're moving on. They're making the best of what they can with the transition under the circumstances, and he's already chosen some of his key staff. We heard that His chief of staff will be Ron Klain, who's very much a Democratic insider. He's been in politics for a very long time. He worked in many campaigns in the past as well. We also see that most of the staff selected, this is the staff that has been selected to look at the Department of Justice, are corporate lawyers. This has led to complaints from the left of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing, as they are sometimes referred to, saying that it's going to be much more of the same under Joe Biden. What do you make of these appointments that we do know about and the speculation going around about other key appointments?
Well, Ron Klain, I know Ron Klain very well. He is the consummate professional. He's going to do a fantastic job as White House Chief of Staff. He did a fantastic job leading the United States response to Ebola during the Obama administration, and he's been at various jobs within the White House and within the federal government throughout his career. So we're going to be in very good hands with Ron Klain. You know, as for lawyers being chosen to look into the Justice Department and some complaints from the left, there'll always be stories like that during transition. Let's wait and see who he picks for Attorney General. I think people like Andrew Cuomo, Stacey Abrams, may be floated around for it.
Yeah.
There are very good people in the Democratic Party who will not be political hacks like the one we have right now in Bill Barr, who's just there to serve the president and stroke his ego. As for question marks remaining in the election, there really are no real question marks in the election. The president can't even get real lawyers to handle his case in court anymore. That's how bad his complaints are. It's time for everyone to acknowledge the victory, just as Hillary Clinton did 12 hours after the votes were cast in 2016. So this is just enough of the nonsense. Time to move on. You know, the president should look to what happened around the world and around this country with people dancing in the street that he had been defeated as a sign that maybe it's just time to go.
Brian, looking at the projected winner, Joe Biden's priorities for Europe, what do you think he'd be looking at first in Europe?
Certainly, I think Brexit is going to be front and centre because it's going to land on his doorstep very much early on in the new year. We're going to see Brexit happening, finally, after all the talk. So it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic plays out there. Certainly from an Irish perspective, the big focus will be if there will be any impact on the Northern Ireland situation. Joe Biden himself in the past has said, of course, that he will do everything to protect the Good Friday Agreement and peace in Northern Ireland, which is key. So everybody was watching this relationship today of when would he speak to Boris Johnson? What way would that congratulatory phone call go? What way would that readout of that phone call go? Of course, Boris Johnson, an ally and a friend of Donald Trump. So perhaps for Donald Trump this week, when we saw all the world leaders calling Joe Biden to congratulate him, perhaps that one hurt the most when he saw his friend congratulating him and telling him that was all over. Just to pick up on an earlier point about people suggesting, would Donald Trump run again in 2024? My question is, my goodness me, why wouldn't he? He had a fantastic election. He had 73 million votes. He got more votes than any other presidential candidate ever, except Joe Biden. So I think what we're probably going to see over the coming weeks, maybe if there's some sort of formal certification and formal announcement of Joe Biden, maybe then we'll not quite see a concession speech from Donald Trump. Maybe he'll couch it in a big announcement for a 2024 run. But again, 4 years, of course, an eternity in politics. Who knows what the landscape will look like then?
Right, one other question, Brian, and if you could be brief, please, and that is Joe Biden's approach to Russia. You know, I was looking at a list of actions that have been taken by Donald Trump against Russia, which is published here in Washington by the Brookings Institute. He's taken quite a range of actions against not just the country, but against individuals in that country. Do you think that's going to continue under Joe Biden?
Again, it was interesting to see the list of leaders, as they called him, check off the list. I don't think we have Russia yet, do we? I think there was something during the week about how they were waiting to see until everything was finalized. The Donald Trump-Russia dynamic relationship will be one of the things that everybody remembers about his presidency. Big question marks, collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation, and question marks that still hang over that relationship, so much so that we're now seeing a scenario where some people are speculating, will Donald Trump try to go down the self-pardon route in his final remaining weeks in office because of question marks remaining over the obstruction of justice charges, the question marks over his personal dealings, financial dealings, things he couldn't be prosecuted for when he was a sitting president? Will it be something that will arise when he is citizen Trump? And this is something he's going to try and prevent by way of some kind of a pardon.
Okay, Ron Elfenbein, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious diseases expert, had this advice for the country. He was talking just the other day. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I think the encouraging news that people need to understand that public health measures, not lockdown of the country, but public health measures that are rather simple and easy to understand, the universal wearing of masks, the physical distancing, the avoiding congregate and crowded places, outdoors better than indoors, washing hands. It sounds simple in the context of this ominous outbreak, but in fact it can turn it around, and that's what we really need to do.
So, Ron, if I get this right, Dr. Fauci's advice there is, look, no more lockdowns, but more rigorous observance of public health measures like wearing masks, washing of hands, keeping one's distance, etc. What do you make of that?
I think he's absolutely right. I think that the idea that the lockdowns really served any purpose has, for the most part, been disproven. Yes, if you want to look at flattening the curve, so to speak, that did occur initially. We never really overwhelmed the medical system, but at the same time, it didn't achieve other goals that they had set out. They kind of kept moving the goalposts, and it never really achieved what they had asked for, shutting the whole country down. So I completely agree with Dr. Fauci that the idea of another shutdown is not a good one, and that we should really just be focusing on, as he said, public health measures, contact tracing, more testing, wearing your mask, avoiding large gatherings, things like that. And I want to really point out too that, again, I mean, I'm an optimist, and I think people should look at the light at the end of the tunnel and understand that, God forbid you get coronavirus. The best time to get coronavirus is now, or in the next couple of months. It's not 3 months ago, it's not 4 months ago, it's not 6 months ago. It's right now or in the future. That sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. We've come so much farther along in terms of our treatment modalities, our protocols to how to treat, our treatment options, and now potentially multiple vaccines that are available. And I do want to point out that the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna, by the way, are two companies that are putting out a brand new technology that's never been tried before, or never been made publicly available before, rather. It's called an mRNA vaccine. It's the first time ever it's been done. It'll be widely available, very easy to produce, very cheap to produce, and it's a groundbreaking thing. I mean, most vaccines take up to 10 years to develop. This one will be done with inside of a year. I mean, that is a remarkable. I would put it on par with getting a man to the moon and back in terms of the technology involved and the fact that all hands on deck to do this. And that was a lot of it was Operation Warp Speed that the federal government put into place in the last few earlier in the pandemic to try to encourage companies to do this.
Right, Ron.
So it's a really remarkable thing.
Ron, in the 10 seconds we have left, but the challenge of distributing this vaccine will still remain.
Absolutely, yes, no question. It has to be refrigerated. In the United States, it's not quite as much, but worldwide, it's going to be a huge challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.